Hey you guys, welcome back. Guess what I have here in front of me? I have the brand new Natasha Denona Golden eyeshadow palette. I haven't even unboxed it yet. We're gonna unbox it together today and of course test it out and see how good this palette is. I know Natasha Denona's been coming out with a lot of eyeshadow palettes lately, and because she's more expensive, I feel like I need to be more critical of her, although it's hard for me to do that because I really love her eyeshadow palettes. And I do have some conflicting thoughts on this one. As I always do, I have conflicting thoughts about everything in life, including makeup. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. We'll get into it today. I will, of course, include swatches, all the information about the palette. But before we do that, if you are new here, a very special welcome to you. Please subscribe to my channel and make sure that your notifications are turned on. With all that out of the way, let's get right to it. Here's what the box looks like. Nice and golden. Ooh, very, very pretty. Very shiny, which means if the outside is shiny, yeah, it looks like it's gonna be shiny. It's gonna show a lot of fingerprints. I'm not that particular about that. Ooh, I like the little like wave in it though. That's a cool little detail. Fun. Okay, let's have a peek inside. Okay, man, you guys, that's very pretty. So I had two thoughts when I saw this release, when I saw the pictures of this palette. My very first thought was, that looks like what I was hoping the bronze palette would have been. Has a lot more light shades, matte and shimmer, a little bit more variety. It looks very pretty. But my second thought was, seriously, another Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette? Her palettes seem to be releasing awfully quickly. Clearly, we're buying them. It's working for her because, I mean, I bought it and maybe some of you did as well. But she is more expensive, so I get a little bit, I'm a little more critical with someone like Natasha Denona releasing a lot of palettes versus a ColourPop, who we kind of, because they're more affordable, we kind of expect that. I recognize $69 for an eyeshadow palette is very expensive for nearly all of us. So I will try to be very critical of this palette as far as, are there alternatives out there that are more affordable? My guess is probably yes, especially when you're dealing with a color story that's relatively like a warm neutral like this is. I'm immediately thinking of one palette in particular, and that's the Wet n Wild. Actually, I have it right here. The Always Naked palette. Did Natasha dupe Wet n Wild? There's a hot take right there. Color story wise and just variety of finishes, shimmers and mattes, light to dark, they kind of remind me of each other. So very curious if this is gonna be so much different than the $8 Wet n Wild palette. I imagine it will be a little different. Maybe I'll do a couple comparisons at the end of this video. Before we dip into the palette itself, I will insert for you guys right here a close-up of the palette along with some swatches so you can see how it looks swatched on my arm and how the shades look compared to each other. Everything seems quite warm, but not overly orangey. If the bronze palette was much too terracotta orange and copper toned for you, this seems like a more safe bet, like a warmer version of her Glam palette or a more brown version of her I Need a Nude palette, both of which I love. So when I talk about my love for Natasha Denona, I get a lot of feedback from people or questions. What is it about her formula that makes it worth the money? And I don't know that I would ever say for anyone else that it's worth the $69 that you pay, but what is unique about her formula? I mean, they're obviously very high quality, but it's really her shimmer, her variety of shimmer finishes that give her palettes just a little bit more pizzazz and dimension than you would get from something like a Wet n Wild palette like this. The difference might be quite subtle. I mean, for example, let's just take this palette. I know I said I do this at the end, but you have this glitter topper shade right here, but this is the chunky glitter. This is not a glitter that I will likely ever dip into. Well, let's dip into it right now and see, shall we? I mean, it's just very chunky. It looks a little craft glittery to me. You can get shades like this to work on your eyes if you don't mind big, chunky, sparkly glitter. But what I'm already seeing from this palette is you do have some of her, like it looks like her glitter toppers that have a much more refined glitter particle to them. That's just a bit more flattering on the eyes, that gives you that sparkle without the like in your face, what did you put all over your eyes kind of thing that I get from a chunkier glitter. I'm gonna start off with an all matte look with this, just kind of using some of the matte midtones and lighter shades and darker browns. And then maybe we'll add some shimmer on top to kind of shimmer up the look and make it look a little bit more shimmery, a little bit more glamorous, and maybe that'll give you kind of like a 2-in-1 sort of trial of this palette right here. We're gonna get into that right now. I'm gonna zoom you guys just a little bit closer so you can see things in more detail. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. I will try my best to stay in focus. So to apply this palette today, we're gonna use my BK Beauty Angie Hot and Flashy brushes. And why don't we start off with this shade in this top corner right here. This is the shade Aria. I don't know if I'd say cool tone. It looks very like a good neutral brown. It actually reminds me of one of my favorite shades from the Tartelette in Bloom palette, my favorite transition shades from that palette. Sorry, just had to wipe down a few creases. By the way, I forgot to mention the other makeup that I am obviously wearing. I have pretty much all of the rest of my makeup on other than just my eyeliner, mascara, obviously the eyeshadow. I will link everything down below in case you guys are interested. That is a beautiful transition shade. Perfectly neutral. So I think I have tried, I may not own, I did get rid of her Love palette. I decluttered that one, but I think I've at least tried all but one of her palettes. I did not get the Xenon palette, the black and gray one. I just knew that was not going to be a palette that I would reach for almost ever because I don't like those type of shades on me. But I've always had very good experiences with her formulas. I've never had a formula that was patchier, that didn't blend or didn't apply nicely. I think she does a really good job as far as like quality control of her formulas. They're always very consistent and apply very well. So I'm gonna take that same shade. By the way, this brush, this was the A503, the largest blending brush in that set. We're gonna now take the A504, this little blending brush, and we're gonna take that same shade, Aria. Just on the tip of that brush, we're gonna run that down below. I want to kind of pull it up, make a little bit of a wing sort of shape here. So I think what I'm going to do at the end of this video, I think I will swatch, like do a side-by-side swatches of this palette versus the Wet n Wild Always Naked palette. Not that they're dupes for each other, but there's a lot of overlap in some of the shades in both of these palettes, so you guys can see how unique or different this is to something that is more affordable that you may already own. Also, for those of you that like a lot of color and variety, there's a lot of, like, I wouldn't say duplicates, but you get a couple of shades like this one and this one and this one that are basically just slightly different versions of each other, which can be a good or bad thing depending on what your style is and kind of what you're looking for. If you do different things on your eyes every day, this might not have enough variety for you, but if you like to do a similar thing on your eyes every day, sometimes it's nice to have a shade that's just slightly different from something else so you don't use the same 3 shades over and over again, and then you have 10 shades that go untouched in a palette. Those are the type of people that I think a color story like this would work really well for. Okay, so far so good. Let's jump over to this shade right here, kind of in the middle. This is the shade Teak. It's just a little darker than the one that we just used. And for that, we're gonna use the A502 brush. This is kind of in between these two brushes right here. I've really been enjoying these brushes. They actually remind me a lot of my Sydney Grace brushes, which I also love. But I know a lot of people really love the BK Beauty brushes and own them, which I think is helpful to have someone using the same, like to own the same brushes that someone else is using. And I know I don't switch out my brushes a whole lot. I kind of get in a rut as far as what I'm using. And I've kind of been on the Sydney Grace train for a good 2 years now. That is a beautiful shade. The difference between these shades makes for really pretty layering. I mean, just from light to a little bit darker. Like if you wanted just a really soft everyday kind of look, this would be perfect. You could stop right here. Okay, that is gorgeous so far. Honestly, this is going so quickly. I feel like I'm almost done. Like there's not much more that I can do. So I'm gonna go into this shade right here. This is the darkest matte brown in the palette, the shade Log. We're gonna go back to that little tiny blending brush, the A504, and we're going to put that just on the very tip. I'm gonna slowly build this up along the lash line. I'm kind of just following the same shape, but just getting more fine with each level or layer with each color. It's a little bit more detailed with each color. There we go. Beautiful. I mean, I expected I would really enjoy this palette. There's a difference between a palette that I really love and enjoy and use, but I also recognize that we live in a time now where the makeup industry is just so saturated with so much great makeup, which is a great thing, but it also makes me very reluctant to almost ever recommend a product in a way that like you need to run out and buy this immediately because it's gonna change your life. I know there's a lot of products out there that really are life-changing or that innovative or new that we haven't seen before. I don't know, I feel like a lot of people, including myself, are starting to feel a little bit of makeup burnout, which is hard. I mean, I love makeup and I love trying things out and I do this as a job, but I recognize not everybody can just run out and buy every new palette. And I also recognize that part of that is an impulse to just have the new and the newest and the latest, which is not something that actually makes people happy or is very practical for people. So I try to balance those two things. And that's what I mean when I say I'm always conflicted about these things, which I know annoys some of you, but it is what it is. I am who I am. Okay, so I think right now I just want to jump right over, well, actually, let's try this shade because we're keeping it all matte. This is also a cream to powder formula. I don't know that, I know my lights are really bright. It's more peach than it's looking on my viewfinder right now. So I'm curious to see what this looks like on the eyes. Okay, no, that's not a cream to powder. It's actually a CM formula, which I think is a creamy, maybe it's creamy matte. Maybe CM stands for creamy matte. It's a little bit more powdery and matte than her true cream to powder formula. Ooh, it's also a little lighter on the eyes than I was expecting it to be. Very pigmented, holy smokes. You would not need a concealer on your eyes with a shade like this because this is covering up any discoloration that I have underneath. Interesting. Okay. Wow, that's a lot brighter than I thought that it might be. If you like an all matte look, these are pretty formulas for that. And I do think, you guys know I love my shimmer, but I do think an all matte look like this definitely favors older eyelids. I mean, I am in my mid 40s and I love a shimmer, but I recognize that it does emphasize some lines that are getting progressively worse as I get older. And I think a matte, especially a good matte formula that's very high pigmented, it kind of helps to blur some of those lines a little bit and make your eyelids look a little bit more smooth. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's a reason some of you may prefer mattes over shimmers because of that. I'm just taking this blending brush, which I wiped off, and then blending in between these edges right here. Just kind of bring back some of that color that was covered up. That's beautiful. We could stop right there. I do want to apply this cream to powder ivory color. I'm gonna apply this one with the flat brush from the Angie Hot and Flashy set. This is the A505. Ooh, nice. You can see this one's just very bright. So obviously the formulas between this and the Wet n Wild palette that I mentioned as a possible comparison, the formulas are very different. I mean, I will not deny that the Natasha Denona formulas you get more variety and they are superior to the Wet n Wild as far as the different types of formulas that you get. I mean, this is not just a basic matte, and also the shade comparison to this one is, I think, a shimmer in the other palette. It's a little bit more pigmented. So there are gonna be some differences in quality and just overall kind of how things perform, but I think you can get similar looks out of that palette that you might be able to get from this. Honestly, I feel like that's as far as I want to go right now. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna apply a little bit of my Wet n Wild liner. Actually, I'm gonna use this one. This one I just sharpened. We're just gonna waterline today. I'm not gonna do any eyeliner on the top lash line because I feel like I got a pretty good depth and definition just with the shadows alone. Now I'm gonna add a couple coats of my Panorama mascara, then I'll come back with the finished look, and then we'll throw on a couple of shimmers to test those out as well. All right, here's the finished matte look. Beautiful, very, very pretty. But I do want to try out some of these shimmers, of course, as you guys probably would guess. So these look so pretty, you guys. You do have this kind of like yellowy gold down here. This is the only shade, looking at this palette, initially the only shade in the entire palette that I thought that might be a shade I will probably not use. But other than that, I think all of these shades are ones I will absolutely get along with. So let's try out a couple of these. I want to just dip into this shade in the corner here. Oh, look how beautiful that is. That's a perfect gold for me, for what I like, in a like bronzy kind of gold. Not too yellow, but still nice and warm. And then this shade right here, this is the shade Alchemist. Also very pretty. A little bit, I don't know, a little bit different. Those are similar to each other. This one's a little bit, I hate to say yellowy because I just got done saying I don't like yellowy golds, but it does have a little bit more warmth in it. This is more of like a neutral bronze. And then we have this cooler shade right here. That looks pretty as well. And this one's obviously a lot lighter. These are gorgeous. Okay, I gotta make a decision here. Let's go with this one down here, the shade Alchemist. I really just love how smooth this one looks. We're gonna apply it today with the A505. I normally apply these with a finger, but I wanna give it a try using a brush because I know there are a lot of people that have long nails or that just don't like dipping their fingers into their makeup. So let's give it a try with the brush. Not bad, I'll be honest, you guys. I mean, it applies fine with a brush, but if you want maximum impact, and you can do it, I just think a finger is the way to go. You can build up to that level with a brush, but I just love the way a finger applies. Okay, so really nice and warm. Let's add something to the inner corner. This shade right here has such a beautiful sparkle in it that I'm really leaning towards this one. Oh, look at that, you guys. Wow. So this one, let's also start with a brush just to see how a brush handles these very sparkly shades. Not bad. But again, I just want to put a little bit on with my finger because I know what a finger will do. Do you guys see the difference? I mean, you just get such a punchy look when you put it on with your finger. You could also dampen your brush. You'll probably get about the same effect from a damp brush as you will from a finger. All right, here is the finished look. It is absolutely gorgeous. Very, very pretty. I will not deny that. One thing I want to try really quickly, I want to go back into that matte cream to powder ivory. I want to pop that underneath the brow bone. This is a step I rarely do and I kind of forget about because I don't really need it in the way that I think some people would that don't have a massive brow bone. But I just want to show you guys kind of what effect this will have under the brows. It's actually a really nice formula for under the brows because it has that subtle creaminess to it. And it does apply really well with a flat brush like this, by the way. Very nice. Look at that definition that gave me. Wow, that seems a little bit stark, but I think I'm just not used to seeing that. So as far as my final thoughts on this palette, it is great. I had a feeling that it would be. I still don't know that I would say run out and buy this unless you have been holding off waiting for her to come up with the perfect palette that was like a warmer neutral that wasn't too orangey like her bronze palette is, wasn't too kind of pinky blush toned like her I Need a Nude palette is, or too cool toned like her glam palette was. This is a little different than all of those, but I definitely think if you own all of her other palettes, you probably could get a lot of these shades within some of her other palettes if you were to dip into other things. Also, if you own a neutral palette or a collection of neutral palettes, there probably is some overlap in at least the shade ranges that you're working with. So it really comes down to budget. Can you afford this palette? Do you need to buy a new palette? Are you a little bit burned out? If you are, I don't know. I don't know that I would say run out and buy any palette at this point because I just think we probably all have more makeup than we need, but I will not deny that it's very beautiful and this is kind of your jam and you have a makeup budget that this fits within. I wouldn't not recommend it and I imagine I will get some good use out of this. I think it's a really good one. Maybe not the most unique color story, but I know some of us are very basic when it comes to the type of shadows we like to reach for. And if that is you, but you love the Natasha Denona variety of shimmers and glitter toppers that she gives you, this is probably one that you'll get a lot of use out of. So I'm going to insert for you guys a close-up of this palette again, but this time next to the swatches of the Wet n Wild Always Naked palette. I imagine there are also a few other palettes within my collection that might have some overlap with this palette as well, but this is the first one that I thought of as far as the just very neutral tones with a couple variations here and there. Now clearly these are not exact dupes for each other, but you might be able to see some similarities that may help you to think through whether or not this is a palette that you would like to pay $69 for and add to your collection. But that is it for today, you guys. What did you think about this release? Are you guys starting to feel super burned out with makeup releases? I kind of get the sense in the ether of the beauty world that a lot of us are kind of feeling this way because I know the YouTube makeup thing has been going on for a while now. Many of us have more makeup than we know what to do with or certainly need. And I kind of feel like at this point, I don't know, there's just a feeling out there that I'm sensing that there's just some burnout going on. Let me know if you guys feel that. If you still love to spend your money on makeup, or you feel like enough is enough, I already have more than I need. I'm definitely feeling more that way these days, which is, I guess, a bit of a threat to my job here on YouTube, but I will continue to try and navigate these waters of trying to balance trying new things with my just being a little bit more practical. It's a tough thing to do, but we're gonna try to push through. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope that you found it helpful. If you have tried out this palette, or if you have opinions on this palette release, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below, but that is going to do it for today. Let me give you one final reminder. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that yet, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.